Are you sick of this happening? I was, so I'm going to show you how with the help of Tannus Tyre Armour, as well as a tubilito tube, on how I'm switching back to tubes at a reasonable weight as well. So what is Tannus? In short, it's a foam insert that goes in your tyre, but as you can see here, it's a bit different to other inserts as it runs a tube inside the insert. So the insert itself is made out of a micro closed cell foam or resin depending on where you read, and they call it the Aether technology. Aether, I could be wrong, but that's what they call it. So what also sets it apart from other inserts on the market is that you've got protection of the whole inside of the tyre, so you've got protection from bead to bead. In theory, and according to them, it should provide increased puncture protection, so reduce the chance of flats, pinches and cuts as well as rim damage. Should provide increased grip and more support in the corners. A bit more comfort and dampening as well. And then you should be able to run it flat if you get a puncture as well. Looking at the insert itself, it's thicker at the top, so it's 15 millimeters thick here. And then on the side walls, right towards the edge here, it's around 2 millimeters thick, so a bit thinner on the side. So the thicker 15 mil at the top should stop from kind of those piercing punctures. And the 2 millimeters on the side should help with slicing as well. But because the insert runs from bead to bead, where you normally damage your rim or get a pinch, you've got the 2 millimeter on the underside and then the 15 millimeter on top that's protecting the rim when it compresses together, which should provide decent protection and hopefully stop pinch flats and also you damaging your rims as well. So the inserts themselves sell for 69 Australian dollars, but I know a few bike shops and a few places online do a deal on 2 of them if you get them together. So installation is a breeze, much easier than most tubeless inserts I've tried on the market. There's no need for special tubeless tape, sealant, or anything like that. Don't need to muscle on the rim, it's pretty easy. The only thing that you really need to take notice of is that you need to use a slightly smaller tube than you normally would for your tyre width. So for my 2.5 inch tyre, I need to use around about a 1.75 to 2.1 inch tube. To install, all you need to do is take one side of the tyre off the bead, remove your tube, or your kind of sealant as well as your valve if you've got a tubeless setup. Then place the Tannus Tyre Armour into the tyre, ensuring that you leave one bead off the rim, so you still leave that side open. Then slightly inflate your tube just so it holds its shape, and then install it into the Tannus. Then you can feed the other side of the Tannus into the bead, and then after that you can put the tyre into the bead as well. So when it comes to pressure, I found around about 4 to 7 psi less than what you normally ran worked best. So for me, I normally run 27 psi in the rear and 23 up front, and I found around about 22 in the rear and 19 up front worked best for me. I found that the pressure was more of a bottom out resistance as opposed to kind of more of a support puncture kind of thing, obviously to a point, but I found, yeah, the more pressure that you did, a bit more bottom out resistance, the less bottom out resistance that you kind of had. The kind of tube acts more like an air spring, and I'll kind of get a bit more into that when I talk about the performance. So let's talk weight, because this was my biggest concern when I was getting an insert, and a lot of other people as well, they don't want to carry the extra weight of an insert, so let's talk about if it's worth it. And in terms of weight, this is where I quickly realized that this was a rear tire solution only for me, but I'll get into that a bit more when I talk about performance. So when we're talking about weights, we're going to focus mainly on the rear tire because of that, and we're only going to talk about weights in terms of one wheel. So my regular rear setup before Tannus was a double down Maxxis DHR, and that was set up tubeless as well. In a regular EXO casing on my local trails, I was just getting way too many punctures. So in terms of weights, that's 1,176 grams for the tyre and about 100 grams for the sealant, which is a total of 1,267 grams. Moving on to the Tannus now, let's compare some weights. So due to the extra protection, I can run an EXO casing to save some weight, so that's 955 grams for the tyre. I also run an ultralight tubilito tube too, which saves extra weight as well, coming in at 85 grams. I did try and run a regular tube, which was 200 grams, but I did start to notice the weight. 100 or so grams might not mean much, but in terms of rotational mass that you're pedaling around all day, I did start to notice it. And lastly, we have the insert itself, which is 320 grams, so that's a total of 1,360 grams. I'd be lying if I didn't notice a slight weight increase to begin with, but after a few rides, it was pretty much forgotten. And I'd take that extra 93 grams for the protection as well as the performance benefits that I got from the Tannus as well. But for argument's sake, let's compare it to Cushcore, because that's the tubeless insert that has probably the closest benefits to what Tannus has, and it's probably the most popular kind of insert that most people in this genre are going to be riding. So to begin with Cushcore, like every other tubeless insert that I've tried, I still have to run a double down casing, because unlike Tannus, Cushcore doesn't have protection right under the tread, so they're kind of more piercing punctures, which is my most popular puncture. You don't get protection from that, so I have to run that thicker casing tyre. So that's 1,176 grams for the tyre. and then it's 290 grams for the insert, as well as 100 grams for the sealant. And that's a total of 1,556 grams. To me, the more complete protection that the Tannus offers, so that B2B protection, as well as that 200 gram weight saving, as well as the fact that if I do get a puncture, I can just chuck a tube in the Tannus. With the cush core, I might have to plug it, or if I can't plug it, then I'm pretty much screwed. So you'd have to take the cush core out, carry it on your shoulder and put a tube in. It's an absolute mess. So yeah, for that, I'd take the Tannus any day of the week. So let's start with the obvious. This is now my go-to rear tire solution for my all-mountain enduro bikes. But if you're riding mostly blue and green as well as XC trails, I still think a standard tubeless setup would serve you a little bit better. Saving that little bit of weight there would definitely go a long way. With that out of the way, let's talk about the performance. And in my 5 months of testing, I had 0 punctures, which I'm pretty stoked with, as you can probably tell. The trails I rode were your typical kind of flowy trail center style trails, and then also more rocky technical all mountain enduro trails on the northern beaches in Sydney. In some more anecdotal testing, I've had a few friends that have been testing the Tannus as well, and they've reported some good things as well. A few of them have had sidewall slashes, and when they finished the ride, they saw a side slash and they're like, what happened? And the Tannus held up strong, so prevented that puncture from happening there. Another benefit of the Tannus, as I said earlier, you can run it flat, so if you're in a race or you just need to get home, you can run it flat as well. But it's just as easy to chuck in a new tube and continue to ride as you normally would. On a related note as well, even when I didn't get flats in my old setup, so standard tubeless with a double down tire, I would still dent my rims. And in the testing period with the Tannus, I didn't get any rims dented as well, so that's another plus for the Tannus 2. Another big benefit with the Tannus 2, as they claim, the sidewall support, and I definitely noticed this as well. Even with the lower pressures it's recommended you run with Tannus, so that 5 to 7 psi less, there's so much support, way more than a normal tubeless setup. So if I was running a normal tubeless setup with say 22, 21 psi, I would be normally ripping tires off the rims. But with the Tannus, not even close, there's so much support there. But what I noticed with the Tannus as well, when I pushed the bike into corners, it really held the tread of the tire on the contact patch, leading to a lot more grip. But what really impressed me with the Tannus was the improved damping. Again, another claim that they made, but it was true. But where it really shined through for me was on the rear wheel of my Polygon Siskiyou trail bike, which has 135mm of rear travel. I ride the bike typically on more all mountain and enduro style trails, so tend to push the limits of what the bike's capable of. And with the Tannus compared to a normal setup, I feel like I could get away with a little bit more. The Tannus just smooths out the trail so much, it absorbs a lot of that small chatter and then also helps hold your bike on those kind of medium hits, so it just helps it track a little bit better too. I found I could actually run a slightly stiffer spring rate than I normally would, which would normally feel a bit harsh and I get a lot of feedback through the pedals. But this Tannus would smooth things out a bit and get rid of a lot of that harshness. Bigger hits were noticeably less harsh too, especially when I case things as well. You were welcome with a nice damp thud as opposed to a real crash or ting that you would normally have. I also noticed on rock gardens with a lot of medium-sized hits, the bike tracked a little bit better and it was definitely more calm as well. Overall, I'd describe the rear of the bike with Tannus installed a lot more calm, forgiving and composed. Those are the kind of 3 main takeaways that I'd take from it. However, as you would have noticed, I've only really talked about the rear of the bike. On the front of the bike, I really did like the improved sidewall support as well as the grip. And the damping, the ride was a lot more smooth and I got less feedback to my hands, so less arm pump, which is great to see as well. But my experience, the more dead muted feeling of the damping on the front wasn't to my liking. Personally, I really like to feel what the front end is doing exactly. I like having a little bit of the feedback in my hands and also feedback through the tire as well, and I was just lacking a little bit of that with the setup. So even though the bike was faster and smoother with the Tannus up front, I never really get punctures at the front. I just normally run a normal XO tire, so the increased rate wasn't really justified, and the extra weight on the front also made the front end harder to lift as well, which I kind of like a lighter front end, like to manual and have a bit more fun. So yeah, I didn't really like it up front. As I said, the extra weight isn't justified for me. That being said, if you race enduro downhill or you run a double down or downhill casing tire up front, I think the setup would probably work a lot better for you. The increased grip and puncture protection will probably serve you pretty damn well. Overall, I'm pretty stoked with the Tannus, and it's safe to say the rear of my bike is not going tubeless anymore. I'm going to stick with Tannus from now on. Compared to other tubeless inserts on the market, I think Tannus blows them all out of the water. There's so many things that I like about it. It's easy to install, it's affordable, there's no sealant to mess with, I love that. You have B2B protection, preventing punctures as well as protecting your rims. You can run lighter casing tires, which you can't do on most tubeless inserts to save some weight. The damping is a real standout for me. The bike's so much more calm with Tannus. And you also get the increased sidewall stability and grip. So many different things I love about it. Unless you're a real weight weenie or you ride kind of more trail and XC, I don't see any real drawbacks here. So for my type of riding, as you guys see in the videos and my other videos, it's the perfect rear tire solution for me. I don't really see a need for it up the front. As I said, I don't really get many punctures up front. But if you're racing enduro, downhill, or you already run a double down or downhill casing tire up front, I think it would be a great solution for you as well. So I know what you're thinking, probably, oh, another positive review, but I only really review things that I like, and that's kind of why I only say positive things, but don't worry, in my full-term reviews of all the bikes, I have plenty of cons that I say about the bikes. If you do want to try it out, I have an affiliate link for Bicycles Online Australia who sell Tannus, but full disclaimer here, I actually paid for this in full and didn't buy it from Bicycles Online or anything. I bought it by myself, so yeah, I actually wanted to try it out before they even sold it, so do with that what you may, but yeah, I paid for this myself, so fully independent review on this one. So with all that being said, don't forget to give a like, also subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions about Tannus or anything, leave them in the comments. I always get around to answering all the comments on my videos. And as always guys, thanks for watching. See ya.